Hello viewers, and a warm welcome to you all. Thank you once again for tuning on to BrandPlus TV today. We are going to be showcasing a very simple dish today by the name of an avocado caprese toast, and we'll begin by introducing the ingredients before us to give you an idea of what to expect. So from the very front, I've got a small handful there of some pitted black olives. I've also got some cherry tomatoes and a whole ripe lemon. I'm also going to be using some slices of white bread and about half an avocado that's already ripe. You will also require some basil leaves, which are just to enhance the plating, some salt and pepper to season, some cottage cheese, about 2 tablespoons, and last but not least, some olive oil to garnish. So we're going to take a break very shortly, allowing you some time to stretch and unwind, and we'll catch you after a very short break. Welcome back viewers. For those of you who are just catching up, we are right about at the beginning stage, so you haven't missed out too much. I will also inform you that the dishes that we present on the show are particularly of my opinion, but you are more than welcome to always try it a different way. So for instance, you can always alternate some of the ingredients. There's plenty of recipes online that you can be able to get some assistance from, and this will particularly give you a good lead every time you're looking for something fresh and new. Now we're going to start this very simple process by toasting our white bread here. So I'll begin by heating up my mini oven at the back, and I'll proceed to place those right on the inside and allow those to continue toasting. But just to save us the time, I do have some slices here that we toasted a little earlier, which you're also going to be using just for the same particular technique. Now very simply, a caprese salad is particularly a very good and a hearty way to welcome any particular dishes, especially if you're looking at something Mediterranean or Tuscany. You can also be able to do this in a very short amount of time, which of course means it does not require any cooking particularly. And of course, it actually needs just a bit of precision in chopping, cutting, seasoning, and of course plating. Now to begin the process, we're going to be seasoning our cherry tomatoes. So we're going to start off by halving those, and I'll be using about 6 pieces for this process. Be sure to always get the best variety tomatoes, especially for this recipe, and you should be able to find cherry tomatoes right through the season and most of the year. So you should be able to get your hands on some beautiful cherry tomatoes at your retail regular stores. Right, our tomatoes are in. Next up, we're going to be adding a bit of some lemon juice. So for that, proceed to half 1 whole lemon and squeeze just a bit of juice over your tomatoes, and you can reserve the rest of your lemon. We'll also season that with a pinch of salt and of course some black peppercorns. And using a spoon, you can proceed to toss those in your bowl, making of course sure to incorporate all your ingredients together. And you can allow that to sit in the bowl for anywhere between 3 to 4 minutes, or rather just enough time to allow you to finish the rest of your preparation. Right, so simple as that. Tomatoes done. Now I've also got some cottage cheese here, which is a particularly good option, especially if you're making this particular version of a caprese as a starter. But you are also not limited to using this. There's a beautiful array of soft cheeses out there. My particular favorite is mozzarella, which you can of course place that right over your toast, and you can proceed to melt that in an oven with a bit of some basil leaves. It also brings a nice, beautiful complementary finish to your Tuscany flavors. So next up, we are going to slice up our avo. So very simply, begin by deseeding it. Simple as that. Now always begin by taking off the stem end of the avo, because this particularly does carry a bit of a hardiness to it, and it's not particularly easy to chew off. And now next up, using your sharp knife, you proceed to slice some very, very averagely thin wedges. So proceed to work your knife very gently along the base of, or rather along the skin of your avo, and that should allow for you to do so without particularly chopping your fingers off. And using a spoon, you can proceed to just dig in right between the avo flesh and the skin, and that should allow for you to be able to detach that very, very simply. And you can proceed to add those to a bowl. Proceed to turn over and repeat the same process by very gently pulling those nice ripe wedges of that avo. And proceed to do so right up until the end. And at this stage, you can proceed to discard the skin. Now for the avo, very importantly, season very, very lightly with some salt. Remember, salt always manages to bring out any excess fluids or any particular water from any fruit or vegetable. It also allows for it to hold and be a little more consistent, especially if you're going to be plating it for a starter or an appetizer. So that being said and done, we are also going to be pulling out a few of our basil leaves. So I'm just going to detach some nice big pieces and I'll lay them off on the table. So 4 large leaves should do for this recipe. And this is simple as that. Just proceed to just place them over your board and wipe them with the back of your hand. Remember, that actually helps to get that bit of tanniness away from it. And it also allows for them to really hold shape, especially if you're going to be laying them flat, especially if you're also going to be using them for presentation. So just rub them very, very gently with the back of your hand or the back of your finger, and those should be able to hold shape quite easily. Right, so your avo is done. Your cherry tomatoes are nicely marinating at the end. And to finish that off, I'll proceed to have about 4 pieces of some pitted black olives. These particularly bring a nice, beautiful saltiness to the dish. They also give a nice, beautiful spark of color, which is something fresh, especially when plating appetizers, which is something you should be able to remember every time you do so. Now, this being said and done, we are going to bring you to the next step, which is the plating. So very, very simple process. We will begin by grabbing our toast and very, very simply proceed to cut out the crusts. And you can proceed to discard and proceed to do the same for the second piece. And of course, this will also work with some stale bread, but of course, always make sure to use bread that's closer to the date of use. Of course, I will not recommend for you to use bread that's over a week old. So any particular slices of white bread that you may have left over will do quite well, especially anything between 3 and 5 days. If you're not able to acquire those, you can also be able to find some beautifully pre-done toasties that you can be able to find at your retail stores. Just walk up to the attendants and mention that you're looking for toasties. A small description: they look like very, very minute slices of bread, and they're beautifully golden in color. Those will also save you the time, especially if you don't have an oven that you can be able to toast in. It will always do the trick. So as we proceeding to remove my toast, and as I said, very, very simple technique. You can also achieve the same consistency by using a toaster. You can also be able to do so on a pan if you can't be able to find any of the two options that I mentioned a little earlier. It will allow you to get a nice, beautiful color to your toast. Now, just to bring us to the next step, we're going to proceed to plate these. And of course, very importantly, begin by giving your cottage cheese a bit of a mix. And to that, proceed to scoop a nice generous portion of your cottage cheese right over your toast. You can alternatively lift that and hold it under the palm of your hand and proceed to spread that very gently around the sides of your toast. Of course, making sure not to exceed the boundaries that you've set for yourself. And proceed to do the same for the next piece. Spreading very gently and reconstituting any of the excess mixture towards the center part of your toast. And finishing off by making sure that none of your mixture spills over, because it will, of course, make it very hard to plate immediately after. So simple as that. Next up, proceed to check on your cherry tomatoes, tossing them once more. And all we are going to do now is just begin the process by laying over our basil leaves. Of course, using the nicest, biggest sizes and the cleanest ones will always give a better presentation. Next up, we'll proceed to place our cherry tomatoes right over the basil. About 3 pieces on each slice should hold quite firmly. And as I mentioned, it's a no-stress kind of a dish, a particular beautiful comfort food as well. If you're sitting and if you're just lazily sitting on the couch, probably enjoying a movie, you can be able to make that in a very, very short amount of time, aiding you in preserving some of the time as well. So right after your tomatoes are on, we'll proceed to add our slice of avo. Of course, always picking the nicest pieces first. And of course, this will now be very easy to move on to your plate. But remember, since we're not done with the dish, we are going to proceed to plate this a little further. We are going to take a short break and clear the mess in front of us at the moment. And when I do come back, we'll be able to take you to the last and final process where you'll be able to see how to plate it a little easier. And we'll also be able to give you some sharp tips that you can be able to use to perfect your own caprese at home. So please don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. Welcome back, viewers. For those of you who missed out on this and many more of what we've done on the show, you can always be able to recap on our YouTube page. That's BrandPlus TV Kenya. And if you do have any comments, queries, or any particular comments that may be able to assist us to be a better show for you, you can be able to write back to us as well through our Facebook page. That's BrandPlus TV Kenya. Now I'm going to get to the last and final part of the show by just sliding those onto the plate. And as I'd mentioned, sometimes it's also a little easier to plate on the plate of show or the plate that you'll be presenting on, just to make sure that you don't ruin your presentation. And we begin by moving those onto the plate and of course adding the remaining bit of the ingredients we had on earlier. So I'm just going to move my avo slices right over the top. You can also proceed to garnish your salad on the side with a bit of the cherry tomatoes that you reserved a little earlier. And this is just basically a tip on how to plate a caprese a little better, especially if you're going to be serving it as portions. But of course, if you're serving it for a bigger group, you may want to do that on a bigger plate and of course adjust the sizes accordingly. Now to finish that off, a bit of some black olives right over our salad and just 2 pieces right over the top of your caprese. And of course, garnish to finish off with some fresh basil leaves right over the center and a nice fresh crushing of some black peppercorns should take you to that extra step. But for this and more, we are going to bid you farewell for this part of the show. Thanking you once again for making time to join us on BrandPlus TV today. And until the next episode, where we continue to show you some beautiful tricks around your pantry and some new and fresher ways to improve your meals at home for you and your family, I will bid you farewell, wishing you a lovely evening, a lovely month, God's blessings, and see you soon.